Have you ever wondered why some people seem immune to manipulation, while others are easily swayed by charming words or persuasive speeches? Imagine yourself at a dinner table where someone with subtle confidence begins steering the entire conversation without anyone realizing it. By the end of the night, opinions have shifted, decisions have been made, and yet you walk away thinking it was all your own choice. We all have been in situations like this, whether in the workplace, in relationships, or even scrolling through social media. A clever colleague influencing a group decision, a partner gently planting guilt to achieve their will, or an online influencer convincing you that you need something you never considered before. These moments often pass unnoticed, but they reveal a silent battle that takes place daily, the struggle for control over our minds. Niccolò Machiavelli, one of history's most misunderstood thinkers, wrote centuries ago about the subtle art of influence and power. While many know him only as the author of The Prince, a manual for rulers, few realize that hidden in his observations lies a formula, not only for controlling others but also for protecting ourselves from being controlled. The question is not whether someone is trying to manipulate you. The question is, are you aware enough to resist it? Most people walk through life with their defenses down, blind to the psychological games around them. And when they finally notice, it is often too late. The decision has already been made, the path already set. But what if you could recognize these mechanisms in real time? What if you could see beneath the surface of words and gestures the true intentions at play? Machiavelli's lessons, when reversed, offer precisely this: a way to shield your mind from invisible chains. Today I want to take you on a journey into the strategies of one of history's sharpest observers of human behavior, not to learn how to control others, but to free ourselves from subtle domination. And as we go, I invite you to reflect. Where in your life have you sensed the invisible hand of someone trying to direct your choices? Before we continue, share in the comments if you've ever realized, maybe only later, that someone had been guiding your actions without you noticing. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe, because the insights ahead might change the way you see every conversation from now on. What if instead of being caught in other people's webs, you could enter every situation with clarity, fully aware of the subtle pressures trying to shape your choices? Imagine walking into a meeting where a colleague usually dominates the conversation. This time, though, you notice the way he frames his arguments, how he appeals to the group's fears, how he sets traps of agreement. And because you see it, his influence loses its power. Suddenly, you are not the one being led. You are the one choosing with freedom. Picture a relationship where guilt and unspoken expectations used to weigh you down. Now, rather than being pulled by emotional strings, you calmly recognize the pattern and respond with quiet strength. The manipulation no longer reaches your core. You begin to sense the hidden architecture of influence. Words designed to corner you, flattery meant to soften your resistance, false urgency crafted to push you into quick decisions. Machiavelli understood this architecture. He saw that humans are not purely rational creatures but deeply emotional, driven by fear, desire, and the longing for approval. Leaders, lovers, politicians, all have always used these levers. But here's the twist. Once you recognize the levers, they no longer control you. The trick only works when it remains invisible. Think of how empowering it would be to carry this awareness with you. In every negotiation, every conversation, every moment of decision, you would be the one with inner clarity. Not cold, not distrustful, but awake. You would no longer ask, "Why did I let this happen again?" Instead, you would step back and see the forces at play, making choices aligned with your true values. This is not about becoming paranoid or suspicious of everyone around you. It's about cultivating a mental shield, a way of seeing the world that allows you to live freely without falling into psychological traps. It is about learning to pause before reacting, to question before agreeing, to recognize before surrendering. Now, imagine carrying that kind of strength into your daily life. How much regret would you save yourself? How many false promises would you avoid? How many times would you finally feel, not like a pawn in someone else's game, but like the master of your own path? That possibility is real. And Machiavelli, ironically labeled as the teacher of manipulation, may hold the keys to your freedom. Most people believe that manipulation comes from grand gestures, hypnosis shows, flashy advertisements, or dramatic political speeches. We imagine control as something obvious, almost theatrical. But here is the uncomfortable truth. The most effective forms of manipulation are invisible, ordinary, and often disguised as kindness or concern. Machiavelli understood something that remains deeply unsettling even today. People are not controlled primarily by force, but by their own desires and fears. A clever manipulator does not need chains. He only needs to whisper to the parts of you that already want to believe. The real battlefield is not outside. It is inside your own mind. Think about it. How many times have you agreed to something simply because you didn't want to disappoint someone? How many times have you bought into an idea, not because it was the best one, but because it played on your fear of missing out? This is control without visible chains, and it is far more dangerous because it feels like freedom. Here lies the disruptive insight. True freedom is not simply the ability to choose. It is the ability to see why you are choosing. If you don't recognize the strings pulling at your emotions, your so-called freedom is just an illusion. You may feel autonomous, but you are walking in a direction carefully designed for you. Machiavelli's brilliance was not in teaching rulers how to dominate, but in exposing the mechanisms of human nature. He revealed that people often prefer the comfort of being led to the discomfort of thinking for themselves. And if that was true in Renaissance Italy, surrounded by courts and princes, how much more true is it today, surrounded by algorithms, advertising, and endless streams of curated information? So here is the paradox. The more invisible the manipulation, the stronger it is. What breaks its power is not resistance in the usual sense. It is awareness. Once you see the game changes. The moment you recognize how someone is appealing to your vanity, your fear, or your need for belonging, you create distance. And in that space of awareness, choice becomes real again. This is where the formula of Machiavelli can be reversed. His writings, often misread as ruthless instructions, can serve as a mirror. They show us how influence operates, so that instead of being prisoners of it, we can finally walk freely through it. To understand why these insights matter, we must place Machiavelli in context. He lived in Renaissance Florence, a city-state entangled in constant political turmoil, where betrayal, alliances, and sudden power shifts were daily realities. In that environment, survival depended less on brute strength and more on understanding the psychology of others. The Prince was not a book of abstract theory. It was a manual born out of blood, intrigue, and fragile loyalties. Machiavelli observed something that modern psychology has confirmed centuries later. People are guided less by objective truth and more by perception. Robert Cialdini, in his groundbreaking work Influence, describes principles such as reciprocity, authority, and social proof, mechanisms that marketers and leaders use to guide human behavior. What is fascinating is that Machiavelli had already described many of these patterns, long before psychology became a science. For instance, when he noted that men are more moved by the present than by the future, he was touching on what behavioral economists today call present bias, our tendency to prioritize immediate comfort over long-term benefits. And when he explained that rulers should appear virtuous even if they are not, he was recognizing the power of perception management, a principle still used in politics, branding, and even personal relationships. But here is where the real value emerges for us. If these observations have been tested across centuries, it means they are not just theories. They are enduring truths about how human beings operate. And that gives us a profound advantage. Because the moment you know how influence works, you are no longer a passive participant. You become an active observer. This connection between Renaissance wisdom and modern psychology gives us credibility to act with confidence. We are not simply dealing with abstract philosophy. We are handling a tested framework of human behavior. By learning to recognize these dynamics, you are aligning yourself with a long tradition of thinkers who sought to understand, not just to react. So when you notice someone flattering you excessively or pressing urgency into a decision, you are not just suspicious. You are seeing through the ancient game of influence, a game Machiavelli documented and modern psychology continues to prove. That awareness is the first step in building a mind that cannot be easily controlled. One of the greatest illusions in daily life is believing that our choices are purely rational. In truth, most of what we decide is shaped by invisible forces operating beneath the surface. These forces are not mystical, they are deeply psychological, and Machiavelli saw them clearly. Consider how people use fear. In the workplace, a manager might subtly suggest that speaking up could create problems for your future. In relationships, a partner might hint that leaving them means you'll never find someone who cares as much. These statements are not commands, but they work like invisible chains. Fear does the rest. Then there is the force of approval. Human beings crave belonging. A group laughs at a weak joke and suddenly you laugh too. Not because it was funny, but because your mind is wired to avoid standing apart. This invisible dynamic plays out everywhere, in offices, friendships, even on social media. The likes, the shares, the subtle cues of validation, all of them pull at the strings of our self-image. And perhaps the most hidden dynamic of all, the economy of favors. How many times have you felt obligated to say yes, not because you wanted to, but because someone had previously done something for you? Machiavelli noted this long before Cialdini formalized it as reciprocity. A gift, a compliment, even a small gesture of help. These are often seeds planted not in generosity but in expectation. The danger is that we rarely notice these patterns when they happen. We tell ourselves we are being kind, polite, reasonable, but in reality we are often surrendering control. The tragedy is not that manipulation exists, it always has, but that so few of us take the time to see the machinery behind it. Machiavelli forces us to confront this uncomfortable truth. People do not need overt power to rule over us. They only need to understand the levers of our psychology better than we do. And when we remain unaware, we become predictable and therefore controllable. But once these hidden dynamics come into focus, something shifts. Instead of reacting automatically, you pause. Instead of saying yes out of guilt or fear, you weigh the real intention behind the request. This awareness transforms ordinary situations into arenas of freedom. It is in this subtle shift, from unconscious reaction to conscious recognition, that the mind begins to shield itself. Freedom begins the moment you recognize the strings. The most dangerous chains are the ones you don't see. No one controls you without your silent permission. Machiavelli's so-called cruelty is, in reality, a mirror to our blindness. The one who knows their own weaknesses is harder to manipulate than the one who pretends to be strong. True strength is not about dominating others. It is about refusing to be silently dominated. Every manipulator survives on borrowed power. The instant you withdraw your agreement, the illusion collapses. Control is never absolute. It feeds on your fear, your vanity, and your need to belong. The subtle trick is this. People don't tell you what to think. They make you believe the thought was yours. Awareness turns every hidden cage into an open door. Think about these phrases not as clever slogans, but as sharp tools. Each one is a reminder you can carry with you in the moments when influence feels strongest. When you hear flattery, recall, the one who praises too much may be the one who needs something from me. When you feel the pull of fear, remember, fear is a story, one I can choose not to believe. Machiavelli understood that human beings are storytellers of necessity. Leaders craft stories, lovers craft stories, advertisers craft stories. But the story only controls you if you forget you are its listener, not its prisoner. So engrave these cutting truths into your mind. They are not meant to make you cynical, but awake. They are mental shields, short, powerful sentences that interrupt automatic reactions. Because at the heart of every manipulation is speed. The manipulator wants you to act quickly, to decide emotionally, to surrender without reflection. These phrases give you space, they slow the moment. And in that pause, control is broken. The real formula, then, is simple. See, pause, choose. That sequence, repeated again and again, is how you blind yourself against every invisible hand that tries to steer your life. Here is a paradox worth reflecting on. The same qualities that make us human, our empathy, our trust, our longing for connection, are the very doors through which manipulation enters. The openness that allows us to love also makes us vulnerable. The desire to belong, which protects us from isolation, can enslave us to the expectations of the group. Machiavelli knew this tension well. He wrote that a ruler must appear merciful, faithful, humane, and religious, even if he is not. Why? Because people want to believe in goodness, and that very belief can be used against them. Our noblest virtues, when unguarded, become our greatest weaknesses. Yet here is the surprising truth. The goal is not to shut down empathy, trust, or belonging. If we armored ourselves completely, we would become cold, suspicious, incapable of genuine relationship. That too is a form of slavery, the slavery of fear. The real path lies in balance, keeping the heart open but the eyes awake. To trust, but also to question. To give, but not to be coerced. To belong, but without dissolving our individuality. Think of it this way. Light only makes sense in relation to shadow. Strength only emerges when we face weakness. The paradox of freedom is that it is not the absence of influence, but the conscious navigation of it. A truly free mind is not untouched by persuasion. It is touched but not captured. Consider friendship. When a true friend gives advice, it influences you, but it does not enslave you. You weigh it, reflect on it, and choose with awareness. Contrast this with manipulation, where the influence bypasses reflection and hijacks your emotions. Both involve persuasion, but only one respects your freedom. This is why dualities matter. Control and freedom, trust and suspicion, openness and protection. They are not enemies but partners in tension. When you embrace this paradox, you no longer live in extremes. You don't need to reject every influence, nor do you need to submit blindly. You begin to walk the narrow path of discernment. And it is on this path that Machiavelli's reversed formula becomes most powerful. It doesn't teach us to dominate others, but to see clearly, so that our empathy remains human, our trust remains alive, and our freedom remains intact. Imagine what it would feel like to move through the world with this kind of clarity, to walk into a room and no longer fear being swayed by subtle pressures, to listen to someone's words, not with suspicion but with awareness, knowing that you can admire their eloquence without being captured by it. That is the quiet confidence of a mind that cannot be owned. The reward of this practice is not just protection, it is dignity. When you begin to recognize the hidden levers of influence, you stop living reactively. You stop being a character in someone else's story, and instead, you reclaim authorship of your own. Think of the emotional energy you would save. No more sleepless nights replaying conversations, wondering why you said yes when you wanted to say no. No more regret for decisions made under pressure or guilt. You begin to notice the moment of manipulation before it takes root, and with that awareness, you simply step aside. The storm may rage, but you remain grounded. This inner stability spills into every area of life. At work, you gain respect because your decisions are not easily swayed. In relationships, you no longer confuse love with submission. In society, you resist the pull of mass opinion because you know how easily crowds can be guided. You become someone others look to, not because you dominate, but because you are centered. And perhaps the greatest reward of all is peace. Not the fragile peace of avoiding conflict, but the deep peace of integrity. You know that your choices reflect your true values, not someone else's agenda. That is a kind of freedom no external power can grant or take away. Machiavelli's insights, when turned inward, are not about making you hard or ruthless. They are about giving you the gift of lucidity, the rare capacity to see through illusions. And once you see, you cannot be unseen. You carry that vision with you, and it protects you silently. Like armor no one else notices, but everyone senses. This is the promise, not just to escape manipulation, but to live with a clear, unshakable mind. A mind that moves freely, loves freely, and chooses freely, because it belongs to no one but you. Behind everything we have discussed lies a framework that unites psychology, philosophy, and history. Machiavelli's observations were not random tricks for rulers. They were insights into the constant dynamics of human behavior. And to see how they connect, we can imagine three pillars holding this entire structure together. The first pillar, is human vulnerability. Psychology teaches us that our brains are wired with biases, shortcuts that help us survive but often mislead us. Fear, desire, and the need for belonging are not flaws. They are survival mechanisms. Yet these same instincts, when left unexamined, open the door to manipulation. The second pillar is perception over truth. Machiavelli insisted that it is not reality that governs people, but the appearance of reality. Modern advertising proves this daily. A product does not need to be the best. It only needs to look desirable. A leader does not need to be virtuous. He only needs to seem virtuous. The surface often has more influence than the substance. The third pillar is awareness as liberation. Here lies the reversal of Machiavelli's formula. If manipulation thrives in invisibility, then awareness is its greatest enemy. By bringing hidden dynamics into consciousness, you transform psychological traps into moments of choice. This is where philosophy meets practice. The ancient call to know thyself becomes the shield against every attempt to own your mind. Think of this framework as a triangle. Vulnerability at the base, perception shaping the sides, and awareness standing as the point of transcendence. Every manipulation passes through the base, your fears and desires. It climbs the sides, crafted appearances and persuasive words. But it is stopped at the peak, your conscious awareness. This structure is not abstract. It shows up every day. When a boss pressures you with urgency, he appeals to your fear of loss. When a friend flatters you excessively, they appeal to your vanity. When a crowd moves in one direction, social proof appeals to your longing to belong. But once you hold the framework in mind, you see the game. And once you see, you are free. Machiavelli's genius was to map the terrain of power. Our task is not to play his game of domination, but to use his map to walk freely through it. The framework is simple, but its impact is profound. Vulnerability, perception, awareness. Together, they form the foundation of a mind that no one can quietly control. Now the journey comes full circle. We began with a question. Why do some people remain immune to manipulation, while others are quietly directed without noticing? The answer, as Machiavelli's mirror reveals, is not found in becoming harder or colder, but in becoming more awake. Awareness is the armor no one else can see, but everyone can feel when they meet you. Think about your own life for a moment. Where have you felt those invisible chains? Was it a boss using fear of loss to keep you silent? Was it a friend who wrapped demands in guilt? Or perhaps it was society itself, pressing you to conform without ever asking what you truly believe. The first step toward freedom is to name these moments, to bring them from the shadows into the light of your awareness. Machiavelli's lessons, often accused of cruelty, actually give us a paradoxical gift, the gift of clarity. When reversed, his insights are not tools for domination but pathways to self-respect. They remind us that control only works when we sleepwalk through life. The moment we wake up, the game changes. This is your call then. Do not let your empathy be hijacked, but do not close it. Do not let your trust be blind, but do not bury it. Walk with the balance of an open heart and an awakened mind. That is the true formula. Not of Machiavelli the manipulator, but of you, the free individual who refuses to be owned. And now, I want to hear from you. Share in the comments. What is the moment in your life when you realized someone was trying to control you? How did it feel, and what would you do differently now that you see the patterns? Your story might be the light that helps someone else recognize their own hidden chains. If this conversation gave you new clarity, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Here, we dive deep, not with empty promises, but with insights that sharpen your character and free your perspective. Because the greatest strength you can carry is not power over others. It is the power to guard your own mind. Walk with that strength. Walk awake. And remember, freedom begins not when no one tries to control you, but when their attempts no longer work.